Hello, my name is Michelle, and I'm a life coach dedicated to helping people to break through their subconscious programming so that they can stop living life unconscious. In today's video, I want to talk about 15 behaviors that people in healthy relationships do not get involved in. But I don't just want to state what those behaviors are. I want to talk about why we wind up engaging in those behaviors or why we wind up staying if those behaviors exist. Because it's not enough to just know what it looks like, what a healthy relationship looks like, what a toxic relationship looks like. We also have to understand why we're not seeing it at the moments that we need to see it. So let's get started. In healthy relationships, there's no self-neglect in order to love, right? Whereas if you are in a toxic relationship, especially with a narcissist, they're very exploitive of everything. So what happens is that you find yourself giving more and more. And it's a dance, right? Every relationship is like a dance. But unlike a tango or salsa, which would be very enjoyable, their dance is always retreating. So you're taking one step forward, they're taking one step back. So you take another step forward, they take 2 steps back, you take 2 steps forward, they take 3 steps back. And you're always going in the direction of you giving so much and receiving so little in return. The behavior, why do we wind up doing that? Again, it all goes back to our subconscious programming, and maybe in childhood, we were taught that our job and our purpose was to please the other person, and that our happiness, that was like not even on the list of priorities. And so we're in this relationship and it's waking up that old programming. We don't even realize that the other person is not giving back because we're so focused on that need to give. One thing that's awesome about healthy relationships is that it brings out the best in us. It's like we become better people. But it's not because the person's trying to change us. It just happens naturally and organically. Love is a positive emotion and it brings out the best in people. But in a toxic relationship, there's somebody that's always trying to change the other person. If it's the other person trying to change you, sometimes a person in that kind of a relationship may not pick up on that dynamic because they are used to having to erase pieces of themselves because of their subconscious programming. They are used to having to not be certain things, to not show certain things in order to get that love from their parent. So it feels familiar. But the truth is that anyone that's trying to change you doesn't unconditionally love you. They're trying to mold you into something that they need. And that's not love, that's selfishness. In healthy relationships, everyone's allowed to have their perspective. Everyone's allowed to agree to disagree. There's nothing wrong about it. But if you're with a toxic person, they can make you feel that by disagreeing with them, you're working against the relationship. And if you don't understand exactly what I mean, make sure you check out my video regarding empathy, empaths, and enmeshment. I remember in one relationship with someone that I feel is high on the narcissism scale, I couldn't even disagree about a musician. If it was somebody famous whose music I didn't like, if I mentioned anything like, oh yeah, I don't really like that, that was taken as an attack and I was made to feel bad about it. So if you find yourself afraid to give your opinion, afraid to have a different opinion, then that's not a healthy relationship. In a healthy relationship, no one's going to pressure you into not engaging in activities that you find pleasurable. Here's the thing. When you wind up stopping activities that you once loved with a toxic person, you don't do so on a conscious level. You don't think, oh, I'm going to stop because this makes that person unhappy. You don't think that way. It just wakes up that unconscious programming from childhood where you had to do that as a child. You had to stop doing certain things because it made your parent unhappy or it made them angry. It wakes that emotion up and you do it on a subconscious level. I remember in one relationship that I was in, I remember I loved to read. And when this particular person would come into the house or into the room where I was at, I would like slide my book under the bed as if it was my lover. And at the time, looking back, I can see how clearly toxic that was. But at the time, my only thought was, this person's going to get mad if they see me reading. And why couldn't I see how toxic it was? Well, because it was a familiar behavior from my childhood, and I was showing up as an adult, still stuck in that subconscious programming. So if you want to know if you're in that subconscious programming, make sure you analyze these behaviors and see if this is happening in your relationship. And if so, is it because of what you went through as a child and the wrong programming that was instilled in you as a child? Again, this is very similar to when somebody's trying to change you. But in this case, it's about agreeing. It's almost like you begin to mesh minds. And with a toxic person, you are never able to disagree, even about how you view yourself. Let's say you consider yourself to be a good person. The toxic person will try to make you feel like unless they agree with you, you can't hold on to your reality. In healthy relationships, there is a genuine respect for the other person's perspective. You're allowed to disagree. You're allowed to be different. You're allowed to be autonomous. In a healthy relationship, a person doesn't have to justify their actions. If there's healthy love and respect, there's no need for that. So if somebody is engaging in something or if they're spending time with an individual, there's no guilt. There's no fear. There's no wondering how the other person is going to take it because you're not doing anything wrong. In a healthy relationship, the person doesn't micromanage everywhere you go, every person you see. In a toxic relationship, they do this because little by little they want to isolate you so you don't have any connection with anyone that can help you to see real reality. They want to dictate your reality to you, and so that's where that micromanaging comes in. A healthy relationship allows a person to have their own things. They're allowed to have separate things that are personal, that are theirs. They don't have to share every single thing to the point that there's no individual possessions. In a toxic relationship, nothing is yours. Everything is, the same. There's no privacy. There are no boundaries unless they're one-sided boundaries where the toxic person can have their things and you can't go near or touch them. You can't look at their phone. You can't do anything. You can't go into their email, but they have full access to yours. So this is a one-sided behavior that does not take place in healthy relationships. A healthy relationship doesn't mean that there are never any arguments. It doesn't mean that there are never any disagreements. It just means that when they are there, that you work through them. You feel like the disagreement has been spoken about. There's been some kind of compromise. There's a coming together of minds, and you're both on the same page with moving in a direction that you've chosen. Maybe you compromise, maybe you apologize, but the other person doesn't. So there's that one-sidedness again in toxic relationships. And if it's not settled unjustly, then it's swept under the carpet. Like, you can never bring it up again. The argument took place. There was a lot of disagreeing. There was a lot of toxicity in the disagreement. And the next day, it's as if it never happened. If you feel like you're not allowed to bring it up and talk through a disagreement to reach some kind of conclusion, then that is not a healthy relationship. In a healthy relationship, there is no fear. There's no fear of doing or saying the wrong thing. There's no fear of forgetting to do something. There's no fear of being yourself. There's no fear of talking to your family members. And I know that one sounds kind of weird, but I remember at one point in my life when I was in a toxic relationship, I remember having my phone and having to learn how to delete recent calls because I was talking to my brother. Again, any toxic person is not going to want you to have close relationships with people that are healthy and that can point out toxicity in your life. So if you're afraid in any way, shape, or form in the relationship you're in, if you feel fear, then that's not a healthy relationship. In a healthy relationship, there is no controlling the other person. There's no manipulating them to do and be what you need, right? That just doesn't exist in healthy relationships. But in toxic relationships, it's all about control. And love is equated with manipulation. It's almost like they're just stuck together, and you can't have one without the other in a toxic relationship. Okay, going a little bit deeper into the control. In a healthy relationship, there is no changing a person's style. You're with that person because you fell in love with them as they are. Whereas in a toxic relationship, the person wants to stop you from being you, including little things like your makeup, your exercise routine, what you wear, how you dress. Instead of feeling endeared for who you are, they're always making you feel like somehow you have to change that in order to make them happy. So if you're in a relationship with somebody that doesn't like you for you, that doesn't love your style, the way you dress, the way you do your hair, if you put makeup on, if you don't wear makeup, whatever is you, if they can't appreciate you for you, then that's not a healthy relationship. In a healthy relationship, the person wants to be with you. They fell in love with you. They like to be with you. In an unhealthy relationship, the person is constantly making you feel like they're doing you a favor by being in your presence or by taking you out, as if you should be so appreciative of this grand gesture of them putting up with your presence. If you don't feel like the person that is with you and you're spending time together and you're going out in public, that they enjoy being with you, that they make you feel comfortable, that they make you feel appreciated just by being in their presence, then that's not a healthy relationship. In a healthy relationship, the person you're in a relationship with, you either have friends in common or they get to know your friends. There's some kind of a comfortness that you experience. Even if they're very different from your friends, they can still enjoy being around your friends because they love you and your friends love you. So you have some things in common and you're able to enjoy being with your significant other, with your friends or your family. In a toxic relationship, the individual you won't have friends in common, or you'll think you do, right? But then you realize that all the friends you have in common are the friends that somehow this toxic person allowed you to be with. And usually it's people that completely adore this toxic person. They don't know what they're really like. So they adore this person so much that it's almost like everyone's just kind of putting up with you because they love your toxic person so much. So you can't really have a strong friendship with these people. You can't be real. You can't tell them if you're having a bad day because it will get back to the toxic person and everything erupts from there. And all the friends that you had, they're gone. You were forced without realizing it. Again, a lot of this takes place on a subconscious level. You don't even realize you're erasing things to please a toxic person and your friends are gone. You haven't touched base with them. Okay, in a healthy relationship, there is equality. There is give and take. There's a comfortness in sharing resources. In a toxic relationship, it's almost like you're on a stipend and they can do whatever they want. And this even takes place if you're the breadwinner. I know of people that were in the circumstances, including women, where they were the breadwinner and they had to give over their check to the other person. They had to hide what they spent, including what they bought for their own children. They had to hide what they spent while the toxic person could blow money and do whatever they wanted. If that's happening in your relationship, that is not a healthy relationship. That is pure toxicity. And that leads me into the last one, number 15. There is a complete lack of equality and fairness in the relationship in every way, shape, and form, not just financially, but even with supposed rules of the household. There's an unfairness where if you do those things that aren't supposed to be done, there's severe consequences. But when the other party does them, they have the anything goes card, right? They can do whatever they want. There's an unfairness in giving. There's an unfairness in love. There's an unfairness in expectations. What you expect, you have to tone down what you expect from the relationship to the point that most people in a toxic relationship don't even realize that by the end of the relationship, their expectations are non-existent. That person has trained them to not expect a thing from them. Whereas the expectations of the toxic person are so high that you are striving every day 24/7 to accommodate, to somehow give or satisfy those expectations because somehow you think that the lack of happiness in the relationship is your fault. If that unfairness is felt, then that is not healthy. That's toxic behavior. For those that are in relationships with narcissists or those that feel they have been in toxic relationships in the past, how many of these behaviors existed in your relationship? Do you see the connection between your subconscious programming and what was tolerated as an adult? If we don't see that, if we don't understand why we tolerated certain things, we run the risk of repeating again and again.